Usually when we talk about making a medical diagnosis, there's a really clear expectation of precision, right? Like it feels like a form of biological engineering.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, like you fall off a ladder, your arm hurts, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows that stark, jagged white line right across the bone. And the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. That's the problem.
Right. It's entirely binary. Like the bone is either structurally intact or it's fractured. And, human beings naturally gravitate toward that level of certainty.
We really do.
We like our problems to be visible, quantifiable, easily categorized, so we can just apply a direct fix.
Exactly. But then you step out of orthopedics and into something like the world of, say, neurodevelopment or chronic autoimmune conditions or psychological trauma, and suddenly that crisp, high-definition X-ray machine it's completely useless.
Yeah, because you're looking at a diagnostic landscape that isn't just murky, it's entirely systemic. You have to look at, like, sleep patterns and environmental stressors, childhood history, diet, cortisol levels.
Right, which is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. You're no longer looking for a broken piece. You're looking for a broken process. You're trying to track the flow of the entire system.
Which is incredibly difficult.
It is. Now, what if we take that exact same conceptual shift and apply it to the rise and fall of human civilizations?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because historically, we tend to look at the timeline of humanity like a series of broken bones. We look for the jagged white line on the historical X-ray.
Right. We say the Roman Empire fell because they overexpanded their borders and the Visigoths invaded.
Exactly. Or, the Mayan civilization collapsed because of a prolonged drought.
Yeah.
We point at the single catastrophic event and call it the cause.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the underlying health of a society, like the actual beating vital signs of a civilization, are completely invisible to that kind of normal historical analysis?
That is a fundamental reframing of how we process history, because we are so heavily conditioned to measure a society's success by its tangible outputs.
The stuff we can see.
Right, the stuff. We look at the gross domestic product, or the height of its skyscrapers, the complexity of its supply chains, the sheer physical strength of its military. We look at those massive physical structures, and we just equate that mass with systemic health.
Yeah. We see the sturdy walls and just naturally assume that everything inside the building is functioning perfectly. But today, we are going on a deep dive into a framework that completely shatters that assumption. We're exploring a theory that suggests civilizations actually die from the inside out, long before the walls ever crumble.
And this isn't just a philosophical musing either.
Not at all. We're diving into an incredibly complex, honestly, astonishingly detailed framework created by Dr. Khaled Waleed. It's called the Cybernetic Covenant, or in Arabic, Tadaburi Mithaq.
Yeah, and Dr. Waleed's framework is genuinely unlike anything we typically encounter in either historical analysis or systems theory.
It's wild.
It really is. What he's done is essentially take ancient sacred texts and linguistic roots, and he's merged them with advanced systems engineering.
And nonlinear dynamics.
Right, nonlinear dynamics, differential equations, and human neurophysiology.
Mm-hmm.
He has woven all of these seemingly totally disparate fields into a single, unified, theoretical model.
It's basically a mathematical proof for why civilizations and even the individual human mind either thrive in a state of sustainable flow or inevitably collapse into ruin.
Yes.
I'll be completely honest with you. When I first started reading through the sources for today, which, just so you know, consists entirely of excerpts from Dr. Khaled Waleed's work, specifically his text, The Cybernetic Covenant, Dynamics of Beca and Mach, I had to stop and reread pages multiple times. The ambition of it is just staggering.
It's dense, but it's brilliant.
So I want to pose a question to you, the person listening right now, maybe driving your car or making breakfast. What if the ancient words we read in sacred texts aren't just, historical names of old cities or poetic moral allegories?
What if they're actual mathematical parameters?
Exactly. What if the rise and fall of ancient societies can be charted on a graph using nonlinear calculus to accurately predict our own modern systemic burnouts? Today, we're going to look under the hood at the underlying code of civilization.
Which requires us to move away from viewing history as a collection of moral tales about good and bad kings. Instead, Dr. Waleed is asking us to view history through the strict, unforgiving lens of a cybernetic system, one governed by the actual laws of physics and energy transfer.
But before we jump into the deep end of these equations, I think it's really important to set a boundary for our exploration today.
Definitely.
Because Dr. Waleed's work eventually maps these highly theoretical mathematical concepts onto real-world geography, specifically locations in the Middle East. And because we're dealing with geography and ancient texts that carry immense contemporary political and historical weight, I want to be super clear with you that our mission today is entirely analytical.
We aren't taking any political sides here.
Right. We aren't endorsing any specific geographical claims, and we certainly aren't weighing in on centuries-old historical disputes. We're simply putting on our engineering hats to partially understand the mechanics of this fascinating, deeply intricate model, exactly as Dr. Waleed designed it.
And that analytical distance is crucial because in Dr. Waleed's model, terms that people usually fight literal wars over are treated simply as the anode and cathode of an electrical circuit.
So let's start right there with the foundation of the circuit. The absolute core of Dr. Waleed's theory rests on a radical redefinition of two ancient, heavily debated terms, Beca and Mecca.
Right.
Now, historically, if you look at almost any conventional map or read mainstream theological commentary, the general assumption is that these are just two different names for the exact same physical city. It's viewed as just a linguistic quirk, right? A dialectical variation over time.
A nickname, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But Dr. Waleed completely rejects that. He argues that they are entirely opposite functional states in a cybernetic system.
And to understand how he arrives at that, we really have to look at his phonological analysis of the Arabic language.
Of phonetics.
Yeah.
Like the actual sounds of the words.
Yes. Arabic is heavily root-based, meaning the core meaning of a concept is embedded in three foundational consonants. Dr. Waleed isn't just looking at the dictionary definitions of these words. He's looking at the mechanical physics of how the words are constructed and physically pronounced in the human mouth.
Okay, let's start with Beca.
Right, so Beca comes from the root BKK, or Bach. In the ancient linguistic structure, this root represents bursting forth, opening, flowing, charging, and crowding together.
Which actually makes sense if you think about the physical act of making the B sound.
Precisely. The letter B is a plosive consonant. To say it, you have to press your lips together, build up air pressure in your mouth, and then physically burst your lips open to release the sound outward. The physical mechanics of the phonetics literally mirror the conceptual meaning.
That is so cool. So Beca is fundamentally the concept of a source. It's an outward push of energy.
Exactly. In Dr. Waleed's cybernetic model, Beca is the positive feedback loop. It represents the center of knowledge, spiritual connection, universal guidance, and biological blessing. If we're looking at the schematic of a system, Beca is the charging pole. It's open, flowing outward, providing energy to the rest of the circuit.
Okay, and then we have the counterpart. The other side of the equation, Mac. The root here is MKK, or Mac, and the linguistic meaning embedded in this root is sucking, extracting, pressing, depleting, and drawing in.
The exact opposite.
Completely. Dr. Waleed points to ancient usages where Mac was used to describe the action of a young animal aggressively suckling all the milk from its mother, or someone extracting the marrow from a bone until the bone is completely hollow and dry. And again, looking at the phonetics, to make the M sound, you press your lips together, but the sound resonates inward through the nasal cavity. It's a drawn, inward, humming sound.
It is literally a vacuum. So functionally, Mecca represents the center of material consumption, resource competition, extracting wealth, heat, and physical mass. If Beca is the outward-flowing charging pole, Mecca is the inward-drawing consuming pole.
Okay, let me see if I can translate that into an analogy that someone listening right now can immediately feel. Think about the smartphone sitting in your pocket.
Okay.
In Dr. Waleed's framework, Beca is the state your phone is in when it's plugged directly into the wall outlet.
Right.
It's receiving a steady, uninterrupted flow of energy. It's downloading the latest software updates over the Wi-Fi. It's connected to the wider network, being replenished and optimized.
Right, it's charging.
But Mecca, on the other hand, is the state your phone is in when you're standing out in the blazing sun, screen at maximum brightness, searching for a 5G signal, while playing a heavy, graphics-intense 3D game on like 1% battery.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Right. The processor's running incredibly hot, the internal fans are spinning, and the system is aggressively extracting every last drop of stored power until the screen just goes black.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. But the crucial nuance that Dr. Waleed introduces here is that he does not view these two states as a simplistic battle of good versus evil.
Really? Even with the extracting marrow analogy?
Yeah, he views them as an objective engineering reality. They are the anode and the cathode of a battery. They are the push and the pull. If you want a functional system, if you want your phone to actually do anything useful, you need the processor to consume energy. You need a consuming pole.
That makes sense. You can't just leave it plugged into the wall forever.
Exactly. But the fatal problem, and this is the crux of the entire theory, occurs when the consumption mechanism completely detaches from the charging mechanism. If you run that heavy 3D game but actively refuse to plug the phone into the wall, the system dies. The battery depletes, the heat destroys the internal components, and the system experiences a hard crash.
Wait, I need to jump in and press on this. Because if I'm an ancient historian or theologian listening to this, I'm going to say, okay, this is a brilliant cybernetic theory, but it directly contradicts centuries of accepted geographical mapping. The maps say Beca and Mecca are the same place. It's like saying New York and the Big Apple are two fundamentally opposed cybernetic states. Sometimes a nickname is just a nickname, right? How does Dr. Waleed justify splitting a universally accepted single location into two warring systemic poles?
It's a fair question. And he justifies it by basically abandoning the later historical commentaries and focusing exclusively on a strict, literal analysis of the original text itself.
What does the text say?
Dr. Waleed points out that in the original sacred texts, these two words are never, ever used interchangeably. They never share the same grammatical context.
Never, not even casually.
Ever. The text is mathematically precise. When the text uses the word Beca, it is entirely positive and outward-facing. It's used in the context of the first house established for mankind. It's associated with universal guidance, immense blessing, and a source of light for all worlds. It's an open system.
And when it uses Mecca?
The context becomes harsh, inward, and restrictive. It's used in the context of the belly or the interior of the city. It's associated with physical conflict, warfare, the withholding of hands, and desperate resource struggles.
So the text is maintaining a strict firewall between the two concepts.
Precisely. Dr. Waleed argues that later historians combined them out of geographical convenience, but in doing so, they destroyed the duality that is mathematically necessary for the text's underlying system to function.
Right, going back to our battery analogy. If you declare that the charging port and the draining processor are the exact same component, you no longer have a circuit. You have a short circuit.
The energy has nowhere to flow. Dr. Waleed posits that for the text to make any systemic sense, Beca and Mecca must be recognized as two distinct, functionally opposed states.
Okay, so let's follow the physics of this short circuit. What happens to a civilization when it ignores this duality? What happens when the consuming side, the Mecca state of extraction and resource hoarding, is allowed to run at maximum capacity without ever plugging back into the Beca charging state of spiritual and intellectual renewal?
According to Dr. Waleed's model, if the rate of extraction overtakes the rate of charging, systemic collapse is not just likely, it is a mathematical inevitability.
A certainty.
Yes. And this collapse doesn't just happen all at once in a random, chaotic mess either.
Yeah.
Dr. Waleed identifies 5 highly specific sequential stages of this breakdown.
Okay.
He translates this sequence from a recurring textual phrase, the empty village.
And this is where the framework makes a massive leap, I think. Because normally when we read an ancient text talking about a ruined city or a village empty on its roofs, we process it as poetry.
Right, a metaphor.
Yeah, we think it's a sad lyrical song about a town where the people moved away. But Dr. Waleed is saying, no, empty on its roofs is not a poetic metaphor. It is a strict cybernetic law that governs what happens to physical matter when it separates from consciousness.
The Arabic phrase is al-Qarya al-Qawiya, which translates roughly to the empty, hollow, or ruined village. And Dr. Waleed breaks this linguistic imagery down into 5 codes of collapse. It's a strict sequence of degradation.
Let's walk through them.
Let's look at code number 1, structural collapse. The text specifically says the village is empty upon its roofs. From a structural engineering perspective, Dr. Waleed notes the precise phrasing here. For a structure to fall upon its roofs, the roof has to collapse first, falling to the floor, and then the exterior walls collapse inward on top of the ruined roof.
Which means the top comes down before the sides do.
Exactly. But symbolically and systemically, the roof represents the intellectual, spiritual, and institutional consciousness of the society, the overarching ideas that protect the people. The walls are the physical infrastructure, the roads, the military, the economy.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Waleed is saying that Code 1 dictates the minds and the institutions fail long before the physical bricks actually crumble. The consciousness caves in while the walls are still standing.
Which leads to Code 2, I assume.
Code 2 is material bankruptcy. The texts describe a state of deep regret over what was spent, where the energy and capital completely dissipate. The physical land is still there, the farms exist, the markets are open, but the fruit or the yield drops to a net zero operational return.
So people are working hard but getting nowhere.
Society is putting massive amounts of energy and labor into the system, but getting absolutely nothing back. The engine is running, but the car isn't moving.
Okay, so the overarching ideas have failed, the economy is hollowing out, but society is still trying to pretend everything is normal. What is Code 3?
Code 3 is functional suspension. Here, Dr. Waleed points to the striking textual description of an abandoned well and a sturdy palace. The physical structure of the palace is luxurious, heavily fortified, and completely intact. But the vital resource system that keeps people alive, the well, is broken, dry, or entirely ignored.
If you're listening to this and trying to visualize how an ancient abandoned well applies to us today, let me paint that picture for you in the modern world. Think about a massive, globally dominant tech company. Let's call them Tech Corp.
Okay, Tech Corp.
From the outside, Tech Corp looks like the ultimate sturdy palace, right? They have a beautiful, sprawling corporate campus designed by famous architects. They have billions of dollars in offshore accounts, and their stock price is artificially holding steady.
Yeah.
But inside, their core product hasn't been updated in years. It's glitchy, the innovation pipeline is completely dead, and the user base is secretly bleeding away to competitors.
They have an abandoned well.
Exactly. The vital resource, the actual value they provide to the world, is gone, even though the glass building still looks incredibly intimidating.
That is a flawless modern translation of Code 3. You have the illusion of strength masking systemic failure. And that illusion leads directly to Code 4. Penal emptiness.
Penal emptiness. What does that look like?
The ancient texts describe houses that aren't physically destroyed by war or earthquakes, but they are completely empty because of injustice. Dr. Waleed explains this not as a legal ruling, but as a biological reality.
Meaning what?
Systemic injustice creates an environment that is so psychologically and biologically toxic that it physically repels human life. The buildings stand perfectly fine, but the environment is so corrosive that people simply flee.
Keeping with our Tech Corp analogy, this is the stage where the corporate culture becomes so phenomenally toxic, so hyper-focused on extracting metrics and punishing employees rather than fostering well-being, that all the top engineering talent just quietly quits.
Right, they all leave.
The beautiful offices are still there, the expensive ergonomic desks are there, the ping-pong tables are there, but the actual lifeblood of the company has evacuated the premises just to save their own sanity.
And once the talent leaves, you arrive at the final, ultimate stage, Code 5, organic emptiness. Dr. Waleed cites the textual imagery of hollow palm trunks.
Hollow palm trunks.
Imagine a massive ancient palm tree in the desert. It looks strong, tall, and weather-beaten from the outside, but inside, insects and rot have completely eaten away the core. It is just a brittle, paper-thin shell. There's no heartwood left to pump nutrients from the roots to the leaves.
So it's just waiting to fall.
Exactly. When a society or an organization hits Code 5, it only takes a slight breeze, a minor economic shock, or a single crisis to push the whole thing over. To the untrained eye, the collapse looks sudden. But cybernetically, it was already dead inside for years.
It is a terrifyingly accurate sequence. You go from the overarching consciousness failing to the economy returning zero to the core resources drying up to a toxic environment driving the people away, leaving behind a hollow shell waiting for a stiff breeze. But again, I have to step into the shoes of the skeptic here. Are we absolutely sure Dr. Waleed isn't just taking evocative ancient poetry and retrofitting it with modern Silicon Valley engineering buzzwords? Because, I mean, it's a brilliant metaphor, but it still sounds like a metaphor.
And that's the natural skeptical response. But Dr. Waleed goes a massive step further to prove this isn't just clever literary framing. He literally takes these linguistic roots, the phonetics, and these 5 collapse codes, and he converts them into a system of nonlinear differential equations.
Wait, let me stop you. Actual math, like we were talking about calculus.
Actual rigorous calculus. To prove that these codes are triggered by the actual laws of physics and not just human whim, we have to look at the formula Dr. Waleed created to mathematically track the vital signs of a civilization over time.
Okay, if you're listening to this and you haven't taken a calculus or physics class in 15 years, do not panic. We are going to walk through this very patiently. From what I understand of Dr. Waleed's work, he translates all of these philosophical and linguistic concepts into a 3-part mathematical model. We're dealing with 3 main variables that change over time. First, there's MT, which stands for material and consumption. This is the wealth, the physical stuff, the extraction. Second, there is BT, which stands for blessing, knowledge, and charging. This is the spiritual, intellectual, and moral input. And third, there is ZT, which stands for injustice or systemic friction.
That is the perfect setup. So the core equation Dr. Waleed focuses on looks at the rate of change in material wealth, which is expressed in calculus as dm/dt. Simply put, how fast is your material mass growing or shrinking at any given moment?
Okay.
Dr. Waleed argues that the growth of our material wealth relies on the charging input coming from B minus the natural depletion of M over time, because physical things naturally decay, minus the destructive grinding force of Z, the injustice.
So my stuff, my M, only grows in a healthy way if I'm actively feeding it with knowledge and blessing, B. It naturally shrinks as I use it, and it shrinks exponentially faster if there is friction or injustice, Z, in the system.
Yes. And here is where the ancient linguistics return in a stunning way. Those Arabic root words we discussed, bak and mak, Dr. Waleed uses them as literal mathematical parameters in the equation.
You're kidding.
No, I mean the mathematical function of bak, that bursting, opening, outward flowing root, acts as the thrust force. It is the charging coefficient. And the mathematical function of mak, the sucking, extracting, drawing in root, acts as the drag force. It is the depletion coefficient.
That is incredible. He is saying the words themselves are actually the operational operators in the math problem.
Exactly. But the absolute genius of Dr. Waleed's model, the variable that completely ties the physics to the sociology, is Z, injustice.
We really have to spend some time on Z, because normally when we hear the word injustice, we process it as a moral failing. We think of a corrupt judge, or an unfair law, or a bad person doing a bad thing to a good person. But Dr. Waleed isn't making a moral or ethical judgment here, is he?
No, and this is a critical paradigm shift. He is treating injustice as a physical state variable. In physics and mechanical engineering, Z represents systemic friction.
Friction.
Yes. It is the heat generated when two gears grind together without proper lubrication. Dr. Waleed's mathematical model shows that as material wealth, M, grows rapidly without a proportional increase in knowledge, ethics, and spiritual charging, B, the friction in the system naturally and inevitably spikes.
Let me try to build out an analogy here to make sure we're really locking this in. Let's think of a human civilization, or even a single human life, like a high-performance car engine.
Love it. Okay.
B, the blessing, the knowledge, the connection to the source is the motor oil. It provides the smoothness, it coats the metal, and it allows the incredibly complex moving parts to slide past each other without destroying each other.
Right.
M. The material consumption, the ambition, the wealth extraction is the RPMs, how fast and how hard the engine is physically working.
That is an excellent visualization of the variables.
So if you sit in your driveway, put the car in neutral, and just redline the engine, you press the gas pedal to the floor and rev the M as high as it will physically go, but you haven't put any oil in the car. You have no B to lubricate the system. What happens to the energy?
It has to go somewhere.
Right. In physics, energy doesn't just vanish. If it isn't creating forward momentum, it turns into heat. And in Dr. Waleed's equation, that heat is Z. The friction skyrockets. The heat builds up instantly. The metal pistons start grinding violently against the cylinders. And within a matter of minutes, the entire engine block fuses together and melts down. The car dies.
And that spectacular meltdown is the mechanical equivalent of the empty village. In Dr. Waleed's differential equation, when Z, the friction, reaches a critical threshold, a mathematical value of 1, the system experiences a catastrophic failure.
So just breaks.
The charging connection to B is completely and violently severed. The system enters an inescapable positive feedback loop of destruction. The math proves that societal collapse isn't a historical accident. It isn't just bad luck or a string of poor political decisions. It is a critical point in physics that happens inevitably, predictably, and mathematically when mass separates from consciousness.
Wow.
When you rev the engine without oil, the engine will break. It isn't a moral punishment. It is a cybernetic law of the universe.
I can imagine a listener tracking with it so far, nodding their head, but then asking the ultimate pragmatic question. Like, okay, this is a beautifully elegant mathematical theory about how ancient cities collapsed or how macro-level empires fall apart. But how does a differential equation about a whole city apply to me? I'm just a person sitting in my living room trying to pay my mortgage, commuting to work, just trying to survive. What does Z have to do with my Tuesday morning?
And if we follow the logic of a truly unified theory, it must apply at the micro level just as flawlessly as it applies at the macro level.
Right.
Dr. Waleed takes his model exactly to that personal level. He doesn't leave it in the realm of macroeconomics and history. He takes this exact same mathematical model of M, B, and Z, and he maps it directly onto human biology, specifically neurophysiology and the nervous system.
This is the part of his framework that required me to go for a long walk to process. I mean, he takes city-level calculus and applies it to our literal heart rates.
He creates two psychological output functions based on his core equation. The first he calls inductive tranquility, which he labels S-piece. The second he calls sweeping panic, which he labels P-panic. Let's look at the math of human emotion.
Okay, let's break down inductive tranquility, S-piece. Dr. Waleed defines this mathematically as a logarithmic function. Now, for the listener who hasn't graphed a logarithm recently, why is peace logarithmic? Why isn't it just a straight diagonal line going up as you get more stuff?
Because human peace and contentment do not scale linearly with material wealth. Let's use a real-world scenario. If you are entirely broke, you have exactly $10 to your name, and you're terrified about how you'll eat tomorrow, and someone hands you $10,000. Your stress drops massively. Your peace skyrockets. That is the steep upward curve of the logarithm.
Right, that $10,000 is life-changing.
Exactly. But if you are a billionaire, you have $10 million sitting in a checking account, and someone hands you another $10,000. Your stress doesn't change by a single fraction of a percent. The line on the graph levels off and goes completely flat. You have hit the asymptote.
You don't get any more peace from the extra money.
Right. Dr. Waleed's math shows that true tranquility scales based on a specific ratio. It's the amount of charging, B, divided by the noise of material plus friction, M plus Z.
So peace isn't just having a lot of B. Peace is a ratio of how deeply you are plugged into the source versus how much you are actively consuming and grinding against the world.
Exactly. And physiologically, when this ratio is optimal, when your B is significantly greater than your M and Z, the human body responds mechanically. The listener experiences high heart rate variability, or HRV.
Oh, that's a big metric in health right now.
Right. Your nervous system enters a calm, resting, parasympathetic state. The vagus nerve is activated. You feel biologically safe. And because you feel safe, you have a natural, unforced desire to give, to share resources, and to connect with others. That state of biological rest is the physiological manifestation of the Beca state.
But then there's the other side of the human experience. Sweeping panic, or P-panic. And Dr. Waleed defines this not as a leveling off logarithmic function, but as an exponential function.
Which, if you understand mathematics, is terrifying. An exponential function doesn't level off. It starts slow, compounding on itself, and then it rockets straight up into the stratosphere, approaching infinity.
And when does that happen?
Dr. Waleed argues mathematically that when consumption, M, outpaces charging, B, panic explodes exponentially. Physiologically, this means your cortisol levels spike and stay elevated. Your amygdala, the ancient fear center of your brain, starts firing constantly, sensing threats everywhere. The human body enters a state of deep, buzzing, existential dread.
Let me share a personal anecdote that I think perfectly illustrates this P-panic exponential curve. I remember years ago, I landed my first massive corporate contract. My income effectively tripled overnight. My material wealth, my M, had a huge sudden spike.
Right, massive influx of M.
Right, and by all societal logic, I should have been thrilled. But instead, within a month, I felt deeply, fundamentally anxious. I couldn't sleep. My chest was tight, was constantly worried about losing the client. I was stressed about the new tax brackets. I was eyeing my competitors with paranoia. I tried to buy my way out of the burnout by purchasing nicer things, which only made me feel emptier.
Of course it did.
My P-panic was spiking. According to Dr. Waleed's math, this wasn't a psychological defect on my part. It was simply physics. My B, my spiritual, intellectual, and physiological charging hadn't kept pace with my new, massive material reality. I had dramatically added RPMs to my engine without adding a single drop of oil, and my internal friction, my Z, skyrocketed. My own body was entering the empty village sequence.
That is a brilliant textbook application of the model to the individual nervous system. Consumerism itself is literally an attempt by the human brain to solve an exponential panic loop by acquiring more material, M.
We just try to buy our way to peace.
Exactly. You feel that existential dread. You feel empty, so you buy a new car or a new watch, hoping the transaction will charge you. But because the object is purely material, it doesn't add to your B column. It only adds more mass to your M column.
Making the problem worse.
Yes. And as M goes up while B remains stagnant, the friction Z multiplies, which only further destroys whatever piece you had left. When the extraction state, Mecca, overtakes the charging state, Beca, the individual human crashes just as violently as an ancient empire.
Which brings us to an incredibly difficult, highly practical question.
What's that?
Well, if the mathematics dictate that mixing material consumption with spiritual charging causes this catastrophic, system-destroying friction, how are we actually supposed to live our lives? Do we all have to take vows of poverty, abandon the material world entirely, go live in a cave, and meditate 24 hours a day to keep our M at 0? Because that doesn't seem like a sustainable model for human flourishing either.
Dr. Waleed absolutely foresaw this question, and his framework does not advocate for monasticism or abandoning the material world. You need the cathode to make the battery work.
Okay, good. So what's the solution?
Instead, he points to a highly specific, ancient engineering rule to solve the friction problem. He calls it the cybernetic law of isolation.
And he derives this law of isolation from a very specific ancient text, right? Surah al-Kafirun. For those unfamiliar, this is a short chapter typically translated along the lines of, "To you your religion, and to me mine," or "I do not worship what you worship."
Yes. Historically, theologians and sociologists have viewed that specific text simply as a statement of religious tolerance, or perhaps a declaration of theological separation, a way of saying, let's agree to disagree.
Which is how it's usually taught.
Right. But Dr. Waleed discards that soft interpretation. He looks at the text through the strict lens of systems engineering. He calls this surah a quad-gate blocking matrix.
Okay, quad-gate blocking matrix sounds like something a hacker would say in a sci-fi movie before bypassing a mainframe. What does that actually mean in terms of our daily lives?
It refers to a strict engineering rule against what electricians and network engineers call crosstalk between circuits.
Crosstalk.
Yeah. In electronics, if you have two different signals or currents running too close to each other without proper physical shielding, their electromagnetic fields interfere with each other. The data gets corrupted. The clear signal becomes chaotic noise.
Oh, I see.
Dr. Waleed argues that you cannot feed a charging circuit, Beca, and a depleting circuit, Mecca, from the exact same power source simultaneously without causing massive system-destroying crosstalk.
Because they are operating on fundamentally opposing wavelengths. One is pushing, the other is pulling.
Exactly. Now look at the grammatical structure of that specific text. It features 4 specific, almost mathematical repetitions denying the other side's system of worship. It repeats the denial in the present tense and then repeats it again for the future tense.
Back to loop.
Dr. Waleed says these 4 grammatical repetitions are mathematically functioning as logic gates like the AND or OR and NOT gates used in computer science. They are systematically closing the circuits. They are creating an impenetrable firewall to prevent any current leakage from the present state into the future state.
So trying to find a quote-unquote balanced lifestyle is actually a trap. I think a lot of people today try to achieve balance by blending the two. They hustle and grind and consume aggressively for 12 hours a day, but they do 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation on their phone while eating lunch, and they think they've balanced the scales.
The math says no.
Right. Dr. Waleed is saying that doesn't work. Mixing them doesn't create balance. It creates crosstalk. It creates noise that immediately spikes your Z, your friction. You need to cleanly, ruthlessly separate your charging state from your material extraction state.
And if we use another analogy to make the crosstalk concept clear, think about trying to charge your smartphone while it is sitting completely inside a running microwave oven.
Well, that sounds like a great way to burn your house down.
It is a disaster. You have the charging cable trying to push delicate, structured electrical energy into the battery, while simultaneously the microwave radiation is bombarding the phone from the outside with chaotic, high-heat energy. You cannot mix those two wavelengths. The interference will literally cause the battery to explode.
Yep.
You must physically isolate the systems. You charge the phone on the kitchen counter in a state of rest, and you cook the food inside the microwave. They have to be functionally and temporally separated. To you, your system, and to me, mine. It is an engineering safety protocol.
Okay, this is all incredibly elegant in theory. The math works out on paper, the linguistic analysis is tight, the neurophysiology maps perfectly to our daily anxieties. But to prove this isn't all just abstract whiteboard theory, Dr. Waleed takes a massive swing. He actually runs this exact mathematical model as a historical simulation.
He does.
He takes the ancient textual accounts of real physical civilizations and plugs their variables into his differential equations to see if the math accurately predicts their historical downfall.
Yes, and this is where the framework becomes a forensic tool. He focuses deeply on the historical and textual accounts of Saba, often known in Western history as Sheba and the ancient society of Thamud. He treats the textual histories of these civilizations not as folklore, but as real-time system readouts.
Like reading data logs.
It is exactly like an NTSB investigator pulling the flight data recorder from the wreckage of a plane crash to see exactly which systems failed and at what exact second.
Let's look at the simulation of Saba first. What does the cybernetic data recorder show us?
The text describes Saba as starting with a very high B value. They were given a good land, they were grateful, they were deeply connected to the charging source. Their material consumption, M, was vast, but it was perfectly offset and balanced by this incredibly high charging state.
So you're doing well.
Because of this balance, their systemic friction, Z, was at absolute zero. They existed in a state of perfect inductive tranquility.
But then something changed in their variables.
The texts say they turned away. In Dr. Waleed's cybernetic model, turning away isn't just a metaphor for a bad attitude or a loss of faith. It is a physical, measurable action of shutting off the charging valve. They actively closed off B.
And because the differential equations dictate that M needs B to remain stable and lubricated, the moment B drops to near zero,
consumption M spikes uncontrollably. Because as the people felt the sudden drop in their internal peace, they frantically tried to fill the void with more material wealth. As M spiked while B was shut off, the systemic friction Z rapidly hit maximum capacity. Their societal peace, S peace, crashed entirely.
And then what happened physically?
Dr. Waleed's simulation shows that long before the physical historical dam broke, which is the famous event known as the Flood of Aram that wiped them out, the society had already completely collapsed cybernetically.
Wow.
The bursting of the physical dam was just the final structural collapse, code 1 of the empty village, falling on a society that was already an empty, rotting, hollow trunk. The math predicted the flood by tracking the spiritual and material friction.
That is unbelievable. The flood was the symptom, not the disease. But as wild as that is, I think his analysis of the civilization of Thamud is even more radical.
It really is.
Because when anyone reads the story of Thamud in the ancient texts, the central glaring focus is on this entity called the Camel of God. And the story essentially goes that the people of Thamud were destroyed because they hamstrung or violently killed this specific camel. But Dr. Waleed completely upends what this camel actually was.
He does. He argues that the camel is not merely a biological animal with hooves and humps. In his cybernetic model, the camel is a complex wealth distribution algorithm.
Okay, I have to stop you. I am putting my foot down on this one. I am pushing back hard.
Go for it.
Translating a literal camel wandering through the desert into a wealth distribution algorithm is a massive, almost absurd leap. I mean, a camel is a camel. It drinks water. It eats grass. Does Dr. Waleed have actual hard linguistic evidence for this, or is he just twisting an ancient story until it painfully fits into his math equations to make his theory work?
Look, it sounds like a massive stretch, almost heretical to traditional storytelling, until you look at his rigorous forensic linguistic breakdown of the original Arabic terms used in the texts.
Okay, let's hear the linguistic breakdown.
Dr. Waleed notes that the Arabic language is incredibly, almost surgically precise when categorizing things. And there are many different words for a camel, each implying a different function. For instance, there is jamal, which linguistically roots back to the concept of a thick rope, a binding, or a connecting link.
Okay.
There is ibil, which refers to the actual biological creature, the herd animal you see out in a pasture.
I follow that. Different words for different contexts.
But the specific word used in the story of Thamud's destruction is naka.
Which still just translates to a female camel, doesn't it?
Colloquially, yes.
Yeah.
But Dr. Waleed posits, based on the deep morphological root structure, that a naka is not fundamentally defined as a biological female animal, but rather represents a system of yield.
A system of yield.
Right. It represents a public endowment, a continuous source of sustenance, or a mechanism that generates and distributes resources to the populace. It is an economic function wrapped in the terminology of a producing asset.
So if I'm understanding this, he's saying it's an algorithm or a societal mechanism that takes material wealth, M, and mathematically redirects it to those in need, keeping the resource flow moving and preventing toxic accumulation at the top.
Precisely. The naka was the systemic valve that kept their M from getting stuck, stagnating, and turning into friction, Z. It was their economic lubrication.
So when they killed it,
By hamstringing this camel, Dr. Waleed argues they weren't just killing a farm animal in a fit of rage or rebellion. They were purposefully, systematically, and legally severing the flow of public resources. They deliberately dismantled the wealth distribution algorithm so the elites could hoard the material wealth for themselves. They manually turned the economic distribution function down to zero.
And going back to the calculus, when you forcefully stop the flow of M and hoard it,
the systemic injustice, the Z variable, explodes exponentially. The friction melted down their societal engine. The system was brought down not by a magical curse, but entirely according to the strict predictions of the differential equations they triggered by hoarding the resources.
let me put that into a modern context. It is exactly like a cabal of modern billionaires successfully lobbying to hack the tax code to keep all their wealth in offshore tax havens, completely defunding the public infrastructure.
Exactly like that.
And in doing so, they trigger an economic collapse that destroys the very society that allowed them to become rich in the first place. They hamstrung the distribution algorithm, and the friction burned their empire to the ground.
That is exactly the mechanism.
All right, this is the point in the deep dive where the scale of Dr. Waleed's vision truly becomes planetary. Because he takes this entire framework, the phonetics of Beca and Mecca, the 5 codes of the empty village, the differential equations of M and B, the physiological panic curves, the firewall of isolation, and the historical algorithmic simulations of Saba and Thamud. And he maps all of it directly onto the physical topographical geography of the planet Earth, specifically the Middle East. And once again, a quick reminder to you listening, we are exploring Dr. Waleed's theoretical geographic mapping from a completely neutral analytical perspective just to understand how his model integrates with physical space.
Up until now, we have talked about Beca and Mecca as cybernetic states of charging and consuming. But Dr. Waleed overlays these B and M poles onto a real-world map, and he creates what he calls a massive geographic dipole.
The geographic dipole.
Think of a giant battery laid across the tectonic plates of the Middle East. And the center of this dipole, the anchor point that grounds the entire system, is the Dead Sea.
Out of all the landmarks on Earth, why the Dead Sea?
Because physically, topographically, and geologically, the Dead Sea is the lowest terrestrial point on the surface of the Earth. It sits at roughly 430 meters below sea level. In Dr. Waleed's model, this extreme geological depression represents the zero energy point.
The 0 point.
Right. It's the neutral baseline, the physical grounding wire, where the potential energy is zero, and therefore the friction, Z, is equal to zero.
Okay, so the Dead Sea is the exact middle of the battery. It's the neutral zone separating the two poles.
Right. And from that 0 point, he looks to the east and to the west to find the physical manifestations of the equations. To the east of the Dead Sea, historically encompassing harsh, arid regions like Petra and stretching down into the deep desert toward Mecca, we find the pole of extraction. This is the physical, geographic representation of the M variable.
What specifically makes the East the M pole?
Look at the topography and the historical reality of the space. It is characterized by extreme heat, heavy salt deposits, rugged rocky terrain, severe resource scarcity, and what the ancient texts refer to as the place of warning. It is a naturally restricted zone that forces material struggle and consumption just to survive. It is the geographic cathode, the drain.
And then if we stand the Dead Sea and look the other way,
To the west of the Dead Sea, climbing up in elevation and encompassing regions like Jerusalem and the broader concept of Beca, we find the pole of charging. This is the geographic representation of the B variable.
and how is it different?
It is historically characterized by fresh-flowing water, fertile soil, deep spiritual history, agricultural abundance, and what the texts call glad tidings. It is the geographic anode, the source.
So Dr. Waleed is essentially arguing that the Earth's geography itself, like the literal dirt and rock and elevation, acts as a physical, macro-level representation of his differential equation. The Dead Sea is the neutral middle, the East is the negative pulling pole of extraction, and the West is the positive pushing pole of blessing.
It is a stunning, almost dizzying geographic alignment with his math. But he takes it one step further. He maps the historical messengers, the prophets mentioned in the ancient text, directly onto this geographic dipole.
Oh, really? How so?
He identifies 7 key historical messengers, figures like Noah, Hud, Salih, Lot, and others. And it's a pattern. They were specifically sent to the east. They were deployed into the consumption zones to deal with 7 highly specific collapse codes.
Wait, all 7 were sent to the East. Why focus all the diagnostic energy on the eastern pole?
Because the East, the M pole, is where the material tyranny was happening. The East is where the system was overheating. Think of these messengers as system debuggers or recalibration programs sent into the crashing sectors of a hard drive.
Like IT support for civilization.
Literally.
Duh.
Noah's flood was the cybernetic reaction to overwhelming cognitive denial and friction. Ad's structural inflation was a reaction to building massive empty monuments while ignoring the well. Thamud's economic hoarding was a reaction to hamstringing the distribution algorithm. Each of these societies had forcefully triggered an empty village sequence. Dr. Waleed refers to these historical crisis points as the 7 gates of hell opening up due to material extraction running wild without spiritual charging. The messengers were sent to these specific geographic pressure points to try and warn the populace and recalibrate the system before Z reached 1.
But there's an 8th messenger in his model, correct? If 7 were sent to debug the East, what does the 8th do?
Yes, the 8th messenger, Muhammad, is viewed in this specific cybernetic model not just as another debugger, but as the system's final overarching mechanism. His functional role was to shift the ultimate charging center, the focal point of human connection and spiritual orientation, definitively to the west, to Beca. The goal was to permanently stabilize the dipole and establish the firewall once and for all.
I have to pause here because this entire framework brings us to the ultimate, unavoidable philosophical question.
I think I know what's coming.
If this entire universal system is so perfectly, flawlessly dual, if everything is positive and negative, east and west, charging and consuming, anode and cathode, Beca and Mecca, ones and deces, where does the concept of a single unified creator fit into Dr. Waleed's model?
It's the big question.
Because to me, it sounds like he is describing a universe that is entirely, inescapably binary. It sounds like 2 opposing, equal forces locked in an eternal cybernetic dance. How in the world do you mathematically derive a singular, indivisible God out of a perfectly dual system?
I am so glad you asked that, because this is perhaps the most profound, intellectually staggering part of Dr. Waleed's entire framework. He doesn't shy away from the duality, he embraces it. He actually uses the cybernetic law of duality to mathematically prove the existence of an absolute singular creator who must exist outside the system.
How does that math work?
He starts by noting a specific repeating phrase in the sacred text that explicitly states, "Of everything we created pairs." The text is openly telling us that the created universe is fundamentally structurally dual, and modern astrophysics, quantum mechanics, and biology confirm this absolutely.
Right. I mean, for every particle of matter, there's a particle of antimatter. For every positive electrical charge, there is a negative charge. DNA is a double helix strand requiring a pair to replicate.
Exactly. Even when we look out to the cosmic scale, theoretical physics provides mathematical pairings. We have black holes, which are regions of total absorption, immense gravity where absolutely nothing, not even light, escapes. And the math equations for relativity strongly suggest the existence of their pair white holes, which are theoretical regions of total emission where nothing can enter and energy only flows outward.
That's all paired up.
The entire universe, from the subatomic to the galactic, is binary. Dr. Waleed's math shows that everything inside the created system operates on a push and a pull. B and M, 0 and 1.
Okay, I follow that completely. The system inside the box is entirely composed of pairs.
So mathematically speaking, if the entire enclosed system requires a paired counterpart to function, if every single variable must have an opposite variable to maintain the cybernetic loop, then whoever programmed the system cannot be part of the system.
Because if the programmer was inside the system, they would be subject to the laws of the system, meaning they would need a pair too.
Exactly. The programmer cannot be subject to the mathematical function of duality, fx. If the creator had a pair, they would simply be another variable inside the simulation. They would be just another line of code.
Oh, man.
Therefore, logically, mathematically, and cybernetically, the creator must be ahad, which translates to singular, and samad, which translates to absolute, indivisible, and needing nothing. The creator is the one and only variable in existence without a pair.
Oh, wow. Let me see if I can translate that into a computer science analogy, because that completely reframes the debate between atheism and theism. Think about a computer. Every single file, every high-definition image, every audio clip, every massive open-world video game inside a computer is made of binary CAD. It is all ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Millions and billions of pairs of ones and zeros interacting to create a complex system.
Right.
But the human being, sitting in the chair, typing on the keyboard, existing outside the computer casing, is absolutely not made of ones and zeros. The human is singular relative to the computer.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
The very existence of the binary code inside the machine proves the absolute necessity of a non-binary creator existing outside the system. The duality of the creation is the mathematical proof of the singularity of the creator. You cannot have a closed loop of pairs without an unpaired independent source initiating the code in the first place. It removes the need for magic and replaces it with pure, inescapable logic.
Which is why Dr. Khaled Waleed's framework is such a masterclass in synthesis. He doesn't just read these ancient texts, he reverse engineers them. He treats the wisdom of the ancients not as poetic musings for a Sunday school class, but as the literal mathematical operating manual for human survival.
This has been an incredibly demanding, deeply rewarding journey. We've gone from analyzing the physical shape of the mouth when pronouncing ancient linguistic roots, to exploring differential equations predicting the friction of empires, to monitoring the human heart rate and cortisol levels during a promotion.
It's quite a trip.
It really is. Uncovering historical wealth distribution algorithms in the desert of Thalmud, to laying out a giant topographical magnet spanning the Dead Sea, and finally to the astrophysics of black holes and the absolute mathematical necessity of a singular creator existing outside the binary code.
It forces you to look at the entire world and your own life through a completely different lens.
To you, listening right now, I want you to really think about your own internal dipole. Where is your Dead Sea? Where is your neutral point of zero friction? Are you actively managing your own internal crosstalk?
Right. Are you isolating your systems?
Are you trying to charge your spirit and find peace while simultaneously running your material ambitions at absolute maximum capacity, burning out your own engine? Are you actively feeding your Beca, your connection to the source? Or are you letting your Mecca extract every last drop of your energy until you become a hollow trunk?
It is a vital, urgent question for personal health, both mental and physical. You have to monitor your variables.
I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought based entirely on Dr. Waleed's work.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time today talking about how ancient systems collapse when the material outpaces the spiritual charging, triggering those 5 codes of the empty village.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
When you have a moment today, take a look out your window. Look at our modern, hyper-connected, globally networked, hyper-consuming, hyper-extracting society. Look at the friction, the sheer volume of Z in our global politics, our economies, our environment, and our social media feeds. Have we already triggered our own global empty village sequence? Are we right now just sitting inside a sturdy palace with an abandoned well, working under a roof that is already caved in, just waiting for the walls to finally fall? Think about it.
We might just be looking at a completely different kind of X-ray, and the results are sitting right there on the screen.
The jagged white line is there, even if we refuse to see it. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the code of civilization. Take care of your variables.